We often think of poetry as an art form that builds. It builds connections between people. It builds our understanding of political or cultural movements. But Arthur Rimbaud was a poet of rebellion. He was a poet of tearing down, casting aside, and in line with his Symbolist school of poetry, he sought knowledge in the mystic, in the symbolic, in the felt, in the inner. So today we're going to be talking about a poet that rebelled so vehemently against bourgeois society, developments in science, expectations of gender and sexuality, that I believe his final act of rebellion was giving up poetry itself at age 21. Hello everybody, my name is Carl Kronos. I'm a musician and a poet. You can find my original songs on YouTube, and you can find my original poetry on Instagram at Carl Kronos Music Poetry. You're listening to Poetic Parallels number 4, and for today's poet we have Arthur Rimbaud, a short poem, but, as I'll talk about later on, pretty packed with meaning. Departure by Arthur Rimbaud. Seen enough. The vision met itself in every kind of air. Had enough. Noises of cities in the evening, in the sunlight and forever. Known enough. The haltings of life. Oh, noises and visions. Departure into new affection and sound? All right, here's mine. The brain is a prism, the spirit is light. The brain is a prism, the spirit is light. None sees wherefrom either is arisen, yet in madness night, eyed eye starlight. If your glass is dusky, smeared, or cracked, light in essence sweet and clean will be warped and attacked by the prism's features obscene. If your soft, skull-cradled wonder, this thing of flesh made glass in verse, is polished of blood and blunder, your colors need not bend to biology's curse. Genes and thoughts may tyrants be, but they are not gods. A wronged glass can restore its vibrancy and shine defiantly against all odds. Okay, so for our musical interlude today, here's a piece I composed called Returning to Mist, and I think that's what Rimbaud did. He was this big cloud so full of expressiveness, symbols, secrets to uncover, that by the end of it, he was dissipated, and he returned to mist in his later activities in life, but also in death, and that's where we all end up, returning to mist. So, on that light and happy note, let's go into this piano piece. I hope you enjoy it. It's a little bit longer. Take it away. So, what is symbolist poetry? Well, if we look at the Symbolist Manifesto by Jean Moréas, a Greek poet writing in the latter half of the 1800s, he writes that symbolist poetry is the enemy of objective description. It seeks to clothe the idea with a sensory form which, nevertheless, should not exist as an end in itself, but as a form which, though serving at all times to express the idea, must remain subjective. He writes that the idea, in its turn, must not be allowed to be deprived of the sumptuous robes of external analogy, for the essential character of symbolic art consists in its never leading to the concentration of the idea in itself. Thus, in this art, scenes of nature, the actions of human beings, all concrete phenomena, are not there to manifest themselves. They are sensory appearances intended to represent an esoteric affinity with primordial ideas. And he concludes, art can only find in the objective a simple and extremely limited point of departure. Okay, so if we digest that, what is going on? First of all, we're looking at the importance of subjectivity. We're looking at external analogy being the way to understand these kind of primordial ideas. Think of it like a signpost. A realist or a naturalist might erect a signpost, and the signpost is the thing in and of itself. But a symbolist poet is saying, where is that signpost pointing? That's where we need to see. Even if it's invisible right now, we're going to look in that direction and we're going to imagine what that signpost is pointing toward. And I mentioned realist poetry, naturalist poetry. Realist poetry is really just a depiction of nature in and of itself, a love of nature, a love of the reality of nature, whereas naturalism shares a lot of the real kind of scientific aspect of this is nature, let's describe it, let's enjoy its different forms. But naturalism is saying there's forces at work which are greater than mankind, and they impose limits upon our behavior. So you could say Robinson Jeffers, in his own way, was a naturalist in his, for example, references to evolution as a force outside human control. So Rimbaud, as a poet, advocated for what he called the rational derangement of the senses. And if you think about the poetic act, it involves a kind of derangement. It involves a kind of opening up of oneself to oneself and seeing, experiencing, hearing things that might not always be pleasant. And I think that Rimbaud did this so often and to such a high level of skill that his departure from poetry at age 21 can be seen as, like he says in his poem, having seen enough. The vision met itself in every kind of air. Infinite possibility was achieved. His art expressed what he had to give, and he had enough. And then we read of noises of cities in the evening, in the sunlight, and forever. So life is going on, evening to sunrise, forever. He's known enough. He's known enough of himself. He says, look, I've done this poetry thing. I did pretty well at it. I didn't get any recognition from it. He was unrecognized in his life. And he's saying, look, I've known enough. The haltings of life. This is where we get interesting insight into his mind. The haltings of life. the things that stop life. Oh, noises and visions. Remember the derangement of the senses, opening oneself up to these things, which can be a difficult process for someone who feels deeply. And then he gets to the end here, departure into new affection and sound. And that's with a question mark. Now, what did he do at age 21 when he gave up poetry? Well, he became a traveler, he became a merchant, so he really integrated into the world after spending all this time rebelling against society, rebelling against naturalism, rebelling against realism, all of which has to do with the world out there. He stopped that. He said, I'd had enough, I've seen enough, I've known enough. And then he went into the external world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how can poets deal with these noises and visions and be sustained. So in my poem, The Brain is a Prism, the Spirit is Light, it touches on this idea of how can we sustain artistic output? How can we sustain really any kind of worthwhile venture? And the first thing that comes to mind, pun intended, is the brain. The brain has to be in proper form. So if your glass is dusky, smeared, or cracked, light in essence, sweet and clean, will be warped and attacked by the prism's features obscene. So if there's something wrong with your brain, whether it has to do with things that you're thinking obsessively, mental health problems, substance abuse, if your brain, if your glass, if your prism has a problem, the spirit will also have a problem, because the spirit is light and it goes through that prism. So if we think about artistic endeavors, if you're not growing, if you're not working your brain, if you're not taking care of your brain, if you're not taking care of yourself, that light is not going to pleasantly pass through. So we can't perform a posthumous psychiatric evaluation of Rimbaud because he's long gone, and thankfully we have what he's written, but we don't have anything else other than what he's written. And if I just look at this and I see him exclaiming, oh, noises and visions, the haltings of life, things that stop his life. The artistic process was in a way liberating for him, but it was also, if we take these lines into consideration, halting, weighty, difficult to deal with. So in my poem, I write that it doesn't matter what's going on with your brain. Genes and thoughts may tyrants be, but they are not gods. So you're not determined by your brain. A wronged glass can restore its vibrancy and shine defiantly against all odds. So if you take care of yourself, if you work at your art consistently, a little bit each day, you can avoid renouncing it totally, as Rimbaud did. And I'm not saying that to judge him or to say he should have done this rather than that. I think it would have been better for us, certainly, if we had more from him. And I think that if he had possibly dealt with his prism, his brain, possibly more of his light could have shone through. So to conclude, if we think about symbolist poetry, remember the manifesto at the beginning. It's all about subjectivity. It's all about plumbing the depths of the self and of seeing the external world not as material phenomena that exist in and of themselves, but rather means something behind the veil of objectivity. If we think about all of that, I think that Rimbaud really was a poet who dug so deeply within himself that he found there was nowhere else to go. There was only outward. Because there's this dualistic relationship between the inward and the outward. If you focus so much on the inward, if you focus so much on the symbolic, on the mystic, it's alienating. It cuts you apart from society. And he wanted that. But I think it got to the point that he was 21. His poetry career wasn't going anywhere, unfortunately for him. But of course, we now know how great he was. But it wasn't going anywhere. And so he thought, okay, I've done so much of the inner. I've sought so much inwardly that now I'm going to become an outward explorer. I'm going to become a merchant. I'm going to make deals. I'm going to see the world. And that's what he did. This has been Poetic Parallels number 4. On Poetic Parallels number 5, I'm going to feature a poem by Edgar Allan Poe. I'm excited for that one, and I hope to see you there. And I hope that this episode has inspired you not to give way to the haltings of life, not to give way to the visions and sounds that are a part of the artistic experience, and instead think about things from a sustained way. Think about sustainably going through your artistic career, making sure that your brain is in working order, making sure that the light of spirit is passing through that prism. And I look forward to seeing your beauteous and defiant colors. Thank you so much. Take care.